During one of our panels patrols outside Westphalia and into the countryside, we came across a large woodworking factory in which they must have made wooden artificial limbs for the German military, all well as a civilian population. The family that ran the factory until the Allied bombing got so intense that they could no longer obtain supplies greeted us warmly and quite friendly. They took us on tour of the factory, which was impressive and thought-provoking. There were thousands of wooden legs and arms stacked to the ceiling, waiting for the shipment throughout Europe. There was machinery and equipment placed throughout the factory on an assembly line fashion, turning out completed prosthetics. It was yet in the full production. It was not yet in full production, but we were told by the family that the Allies were contributing greatly to its production goal. We occasionally brought them some rations from the mess hall, and they were most appreciative of whatever we gave them, as food for the civilians were in short supply. They had one daughter, Hilda, about my age, a slender build with flowing blonde hair and blue eyes. She was attractive and she had a pleasing personality. She also spoke English quite well, as there were taught that language in school. Hilda had lost one leg above her knee in the raid on Dortmund, where she was attending school. She wore an artificial wooden leg made right here in her father's factory, and she did quite well on it. Whenever we, Post, Bertrandi, Passatori, and myself, we would be on patrol, we would stop at the factory and visit with the parents and have some refreshments, all the while a lengthy conversation with Hilda, which we all enjoyed. She was flattered and pleased that we stopped as much as we did, and I believe her parents were grateful and pleased at the attention we bestowed on her daughter. I enjoyed our time as we were delighted to talk to Hilda and looked forward to seeing her in a bright and bubbly spirit, despite her handicap. During our last visit at the factory and farm, the mother made us a delicious meal, German style, which we all thought was great. Hilda was sad to see us go, and we promised to write when we got back to the States. I do not believe any of us did. During the last 2 weeks in Westphalia, I was fortunate enough to get a 7-day furlough to the French Riviera or the Côte d'Azur. I would much rather had a pass to Paris so I might see Renee once again, but the army insisted I go to the Riviera. I heard of the French Riviera back home through some of my reading, but it was not a place that intrigued me even then. Unfortunately, Larson and his cousin were also going, which I found out later. Had I known earlier, I would have declined the furlough had I not seen much of Larson since we left Haverford West. All I knew was he was transferred to regimental headquarters where his cousin was stationed and got him several promotions. He was now a tech sergeant. I've always resented the fact that he was favored out, but
Oh, God bless you.
thank you, but not say anything regarding it. The stripes did not mean that much to me. Evidently, it did to him, since he put them on everything he owned. His cat that ate the canary, smile and greeted always infuriated me. But I would not let him see the side of me. I had nothing in common with him, and even less regarding his always smiling cousin. I would have preferred to go with someone like Tuttle or Mullenhollander or even Post. We took several tours afforded us, enjoying that warmth of the beach and the excellent rooms in the hotel, along with meals at the elaborate dining room with its chamber music. After a few days, despite all the niceties, I got weary of Larson and his cousin and ventured out on my own to allake several of the bus tours available. I got one going to the perfume factory and struck up the conversation with two French girls, sisters, who were tour guides on the bus. They both spoke excellent English and seemed like the perfect escape route from me from Larson and his cousin. When you went to the perfume factory,
Yeah.
was that still in operation?
That was a side issue for the Pearl.
Was it the perfume factory? Was it still?
Oh, it's still operating, yeah.
Was it damaged by the war?
Right?
Was it damaged by the war? Was it
No.
bombed? So it was in full blown operation.
Well, it wasn't a big building.
How big was it?
Probably a two-story building, probably 250 yards wide.
Was it a quality smelling perfume?
They were still selling them. They were making them there, yeah.
Did you like the
But
smell?
it was a small outfit.
Did you like the smell?
Huh?
Did you like the smell of that perfume?
Well, it makes you sick after a while. If you work at it all day, yeah.
Yeah. I got one going to the perfume factory and struck up a conversation with two French girls who were tour guides. During their time off from the bus tours, they would show me the sights of Nice, and I even rented a car and drove to Monte Carlo for the day. I enjoyed my time with the sisters and was sorry to see them. We spent my last days at the Riviera sailboating and even did some deep sea fishing. They each gave me their picture and address and asked me to write to them whenever I could. I never did. You never wrote any letters to these people.
No.
Imagine that. When I returned from furlough, the division had received orders to pull out of Westphalia. We are departing Germany for good. We're going to travel to France and staff 100 square miles of the camps in the province of Champagne. Wasn't the American soldiers worried that if you pulled out of Germany, that the German soldiers would start up again?
The what?
Once you pulled out of Germany, weren't you worried that once the American soldiers are gone out of Germany, weren't you worried that the German soldiers would start up the war again?
No.
Why?
They had enough of it.
They were done.
Yeah, they were sick of it, yeah.
By this time, was Hitler dead?
Huh?
By this time, when you're at the perfume factory, was Hitler dead?
Yeah. No, it was still open.
No, was Hitler dead when you were in the perfume factory? Was that time that everyone knew Hitler was dead or not yet?
And I said, no. We picked it up in the Stars and Stripes later.
What?
We picked it up in the Stars and Stripes magazine.
So
later.
he wasn't dead yet.
Yeah.
He was still contemplating a next move or hiding out?
No, nothing.
The entire area was called the Dust Bowl of France, as most of the tent cities were set up in barren, unproductive sections of France, away from any large cities or main thoroughfares. We were situated in a little town called Soupes, which had a history going back to centuries, and built in an old cavalry post, right in the corner of town, which was comfortable and relaxing. There were shower facilities provided in our billets and a mess hall close by. I was assigned to the Signal Corps and used the designation as my last entry before being discharged some months later. What do you mean you used that designation as my last entry before being discharged some months later? You were assigned to the Signal Corps. What's the Signal Corps?
Signal Corps.
What is it?
Well, It's an information place.
Okay,
I was working a switchboard.
okay,
They were giving us jobs just to keep us busy.
okay, I understand. My duties consisted of maintaining and operating 2 large switchboards and connecting the various camps in several large cities and
Yeah.
towns. It was a change of pace for me, but I was among strangers as all the men. I had served within combat or being reassigned. The division has been disbanded, and a man like Passatore, Tano, and Maxi were low on the discharge points and were assigned to other units in Germany. Tano was an ordnance unit in Berlin. Maxi and Passatore were both assigned to an infantry division stationed in Germany for occupational duty. Mollenhauer was the most fortunate. He had enough points, being married with 2 children, to leave for the U.S. after completion of his processing at Camp Philip Morris. So at this point, when the war is winding down, was most of the deportation camps Camp Philip Morris?
Yeah.
Were both of them named after packs of cigarettes?
Yeah.
Which one were you in?
And Chesterfield.
Chesterfield?
Yeah.
I'll be damned. Were a lot of guys in those camps giving cartons of cigarettes for free?
Yeah. And then you got rations every twice a month.
And in those
And there
rations,
was always invariably a couple of packs of cigarettes in there and everything else.
what was the most popular brand? Do you remember?
Chesterfield.
That was a big one then.
Yeah.
I'll be damned. I had several months here before they came to my point level. It was good time period to relax and wind down. I think about the future, something that was more and more on my mind. I thought about applying to furlough to UK, but somehow it could never go through the actual mechanics of applying for one. The chances were slim, and I would get one so soon after received one to the Riviera. My duties at the Single Corps were getting routine and boring, and since there was not much to do or see in swipes, I took a couple of armed correspondence courses on refrigerations and electronics. I did not pursue them avidly, and after about 10 lessons, lost interest and discontinued them. I would get an occasional pass to Reims, which was about 50 miles of swipes. As there was not much to see or do. I only went several times. After a week or 2, I was fortunate to obtain an overnight pass to Paris. How far was Paris from all this?
What?
If you're at Camp Chesterfield, how far is Paris from Camp Chesterfield?
How far is what?
Paris from Camp Chesterfield.
Oh, probably 30 miles.
I got an overnight pass to Paris and took with much anticipation, joy and expectation of seeing Renee once again. I went alone as I did not want to be hindered with a third person following Renee and me about. I was a firm assurance that she would still be at home. I never thought of her leaving just yet. I believed she would finally leave, but I felt she would linger for a while longer, making up her mind. I was filled with fervor and ardor of seeing her again. It was ebullient, perhaps. She had a change of heart and was waiting to hear from me. Then she would tell of her newfound destiny. She would throw her arms around me and explain how she thought it completely through and wanted a life with me. I relished the idea, and suddenly I knew it would happen, and my life would begin shortly. The metro pulled into Paris station, and all the old familiar landmarks and heartwarmings and welcome sight to behold again. I hailed a taxi and gave the drivers Renee an address. As we drove through the streets, all the old memories came rushing back. This where I belong, I kept saying to myself. My days of agonizing and tormenting myself were over. Everything seemed clear. Renee and I would make a life here. The taxi pulled up to the familiar house with its oaken doors, and I gleefully jumped out, paid the driver, and bounded up to the front door. I grasped a huge brass knocker, thinking any moment Renee would thrust open the door and greet me warmly and affectionately. After several taps on a huge black knocker, a concierge from the next door came over. He informed me in broken English that no one was there anymore. The party had left several months ago. The impact of what he had slowly sank into my consciousness. My world has been shattered. He asked if I was John, and I acknowledged I was. He departed and shortly returned, handed me a sealed envelope. On the front of the envelope was one word, and almost printed, it said John. I held the envelope in my hand and I already knew its contents. I slipped into my field jacket pocket and looked at it, at the huge oak doors. I asked the concierge if I might see inside the house. Once he understood what I wanted, he departed once again and returned with the key. He unlocked the door and I entered. It was once my life and my future. Everything seemed the same. The kitchen with its huge fireplace and tables, to the pump of the kitchen sink. I could picture Renee standing there pumping the handle and me next to her, enjoying her closeness. I went to the parlor and the majesty still overwhelmed me. All the familiar pictures were gone, but the furniture remained. I turned toward the cold fireplaces, and my eyes focused on the bench Renee and I sat on. Discussing many things, I felt deep emptiness of some part of me and remained forever here, in this room entombed in sanctity. Upstairs in the studio was completely empty of all the pictures and portraits. The easels and the high stools were all gone. This room, I felt, personified my true feelings, a sense of utter despair. I was alone. I went downstairs and thanked the concierge, handed him a few franc notes, and walked out to the door. I had nowhere to go. I wanted to go. I had nowhere to go. I wanted to go nowhere. I caught the metro back to Swipes and sat there looking at the window as the Serenity quickly went by the unit as it was blurred into the hurried. I had lost again, and I had done many times before, after coming close to yet to lose, with only repetition of what fate was doling out to me. I cannot conceive anything that would justify this action. Was it something I had done previously, or perhaps in my treatment of my own father, or perhaps my own indecision? After a while, I opened up Renee's envelope. Dearest John, I pray this letter finds you well and that God is keeping you safe. I pray for you each day that God is watching over you and protecting you from harm. I returned to the monastery at Rouen a few days after you left and completed my novitiate. I leave for the missionary duty in Haiphong, Indochina for 1 year and then return to a Paris assignment. I am happy and content with my life, and I wish you the same when you return to civilian life. I pray for you each day, and I think of you often. May God bless you and keep you safe.
Yeah, never been to her.
May God go with you, Sister Monique, Renee. I read it several times, thinking as I read it that it was the first time I had seen Renee's handwriting. It was precise and the letters were well formed, and a reflection of her personality. I folded the letter and slipped it back in my envelope, closing a vibrant chapter of my life. The vast conglomerate of men and machinery established in Europe for the exact purpose of winning the war had done its job magnificently, and now was the throes of reversing the whole process and shutting it down back to the States. Let me just fix.
I knew this.
Old friends and units were broken up and separated with the same determination and intensity as they were brought together to fight the common enemy. I was back to where I had started in the Army, in a strange unit, unfamiliar faces, in a place I've never been before. It was time to think of home, and the same tense feelings were brought to the fore again. What I realized in Texas and Kentucky in awakening and myself submerged and obscured in the horrors of war were once again rekindled. But to what end? I had discarded or rejected too many opportunities for a new life, and like my past life, I was left with indecision and doubt, forming a nucleus of my future. I had not written to either Ann or Jean since last seeing them, and I imagine they both gave up on me in one way or the other. Strangely, the thought just struck me. I had written home religiously at least twice a month. The thought came as a great revelation. My future was back to where I had come from, and oddly enough, I felt comfortable with that. It was turning colder as the season turned from fall to winter. I did not have an apprehension and the thoughts of the unknown that I felt this time last year. Now we had a luxury of central heat, hot meals, and 3 times a day. I could not share my insight with anyone at the single corps, as they were mostly rear echelon during the war. I felt out of place as the memories of the first winter in the ETO came flowing forward.
What came to PTO?
It said the first winter in the ETO came flowing forward. The job of the single corps was getting frustrating, and I could not wait until my turn came up to be deployed. Our supervisor was a Jewish major just over from the States. He had no conception of the war and its chaos. His prime objective was to make himself look good to his superiors, no matter what cost to us indignation. I did not like him one bit, and I believe he sensed it, but did nothing about it. One morning, I got my orders of redeployment depot at Kate, New York. I was going home. I shipped out of SWIPs in early March, and we trucked to Camp New York, just
Now,
below.
he stayed in 3/10 of the cities about a month before he got home.
Yeah, it says, one morning I got my orders to redeployment depot at Camp New York.
Yeah.
I was going home. I shipped out of SWIPs in early March and was trucked to Camp New York, just below the Reims, processing for passage to Fort Dix, New Jersey. Camp New York was one of the larger redeployment tent cities, which housed about 10,000 troops at one time. It consisted of squad-type tents with a wood-burning stove in each. The canvas cots were situated on the bare ground, and each man put all his possessions in a duffel bag, which sat at the foot of his cot.
Yeah, right near the ocean, cold as hell.
Oh, yeah? Wow. Very cold?
Yeah, well, they had those little stoves inside.
The mess hall was a large tent heated by the same wood-burning stoves. The meals were good and plentiful, and we served 3 times a day. There was some USO entertainment nightly, as well as movies. Also in the heated tent, a day room was available. Also tended to write letters and read. It was the only source of light throughout the camp, and everyone carried a GI flashlight to find his way after dark. The usual stay here was 3 to 4 weeks to get processed and schedule your transportation to the States. Processing procedure entailed Army records, allotment of statements, clothing exchange, and dental and eye exams.
I got out with 2,500
What?
before the discharge. He gave me 2,500.
$2,500?
Yeah.
Pretty good. It turned much colder and I resorted to wearing my overcoat, along with a sweater and long johns. The tents at night were brutally cold, and even though the stoves were cherry red hot most of the time, I usually slept with my clothes and field jacket on. Lucky that we issued newer type sleeping bags, and they were quite comfortable once you got them heated with your own body heat. I did not see anyone from my own outfits, and it appeared that most of the redeployed troops were from the Air Corps or the rear echelon units. There were no passes issued, nor were there any extra duties such as KP or guard duty. I spent most of my time reading, and we were not being processed. And most of my time reading when we were not being processed. I would find a warm spot in the sun, pull down my wool cap, and spend hours reading. At night, we review movies which showed the latest films back home. Also, the Red Cross Canteen, which provided hot coffee, donuts, served by American girls from the States. There were the usual USO shows, which were mostly old type of vaudeville acts. I never did see any top name stars. I stayed at Camp New York for 3.5 weeks, and one afternoon I got my shipping orders. We were to be trucked to Le Havre and board a ship for passage to the States. The next afternoon, we boarded a troop ship, a converted passenger liner comparable to the one I came over on. This one was not as crowded, and I got a berth at the waterline. We set to sail that night, and as we got underway, I thought of all that I was leaving behind. I felt I had at not writing to Jean, but what I was to say is goodbye. I will miss you, but goodbye. In all probability, she had already adjusted to my absence, and most likely had completely forgotten about me. I had not thought about it, but perhaps surmised I was missing in action or killed, which was just as well. She would have fond memories of our friendship if she so inclined. The trip from the Atlantic was uneventful, except for the fact that the ship was lighted up at night, contrary to what we had across the previous time.
Let's wrap it.
Huh? Contrary to what we had crossed the previous time. It took us about the same length of time, about 15 days, to make the crossing, and we arrived at a New York dock approximately 2100 hours Friday night. So you basically went on the same ship to and from, but the ship that you went back to the States from was all lighted.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And accommodations were much better, and they weren't so crowded, right?
Well, it was a luxury ship.
It wasn't so crowded, right?
Food was better too.
Yeah, because I remember you telling me the food coming down was greasy food that the people from the United Kingdom were making. The chefs from the United Kingdom were making.